Good afternoon, Dr. Ebony Stone.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm so glad that it has cooled down a bit, although it's super humid out, but
It
I'll
is.
take it. I'm not a hot person.
I
I
prefer
don't
it
like.
hot,
Mm-mm,
personally. So, but
mm-mm.
I'll take. Don't get me wrong. I'll take a cool off
So
because
you're in your element.
I am in my element. Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
well, I'm excited for our conversation because um, you were a rock star and completed hours of audio for your audio book, The Power of the Pause. I'm still so proud of you.
Thank
And
you.
I thought it would be great for people who are either aspiring authors or they have a book and they don't have an audio version of the book to learn firsthand from someone who's gone through the process. I talk about the value of audiobooks all the time, but I've never been on that side of the microphone, and you have.
Yes. Yes.
So that's
So
why what we're talking about today.
it was an amazing experience, and so I'm super excited to talk about it. Thank you for saying I was a rock star. I didn't
You
feel like
were,
a
but you
rock
were like, so I'll
star.
be back tomorrow, right? And I'm like, normally this is like a 5 week. You're like, no, I'll be here tomorrow. But we got it done though, record time.
Let's call it the gift of not knowing. Sometimes when you know how things should go, you're kind of stuck in that box. And because I didn't know,
Yeah,
I kept going,
yeah.
right? I will say thank you to you for saying at one point, okay, ma'am, your voice might need a break. I'm like, oh, okay,
Because
okay.
I was surprised that you didn't feel it the next day.
Pure adrenaline.
Yeah, it's probably just pure
Pure
adrenaline.
adrenaline.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to even offer an audio version of your book?
Yeah,
What
great question. So, first of all, in order to understand why I decided to offer an audio version, I think we got to back up and kind of understand kind of where the book was born from. And the book was born from a place of healing for myself. And I walked through in the book kind of my ascent in corporate America and what it looked like and what it looked like to be a career woman and a family woman and a community woman and all of those things. And as I told my story and I finished, and I was like, I have a book, it hit me that when I was doing all of those things, one of the things that I was good for, I always wanted to learn, right? But I
Mhm.
didn't have time to read a book. I literally did not have the time. But on my commute to and from work, or on my commute to and from the extracurricular activities, or sitting at a practice for one of my kids, I was often listening to a book.
Mhm.
And so I said, there's no way that I can put this book out with my target audience
Yeah.
literally being those women doing the same thing I'm doing and not give them a way to hear the book if they can't sit down and read it.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I would sit down to read a book and I get through a couple pages, and not that the book was no good, but I was like exhausted. And so the
Yeah.
next thing I know, I'm asleep.
Oh
And
no.
so, because it was usually at the end of the day after you did the 57 things that you had on your
Right.
to-do list.
Right.
So that's why I decided I had to offer an audiobook. There was just no
So
other.
so you were already an audiobook listener. So you knew like, okay, if my target audience is people are similar to who I am, then they're probably as busy as I am. And
Yeah.
so having this audio version of it, will give them the space to be doing something else, whether they're driving, they're commuting, whatever, and they're listening to you, talk about your journey. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great reason. So, for authors or aspiring authors who are watching, the lesson that I hear is knowing your audience. Because,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And knowing that it is an option, right? When you listen to audiobooks, I'll tell you, I started listening to audiobooks a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
before Audible was popular, before I think audiobooks, I'm about to tell you just how old I am, but I started listening to audiobooks when you would go to the library and you would check them out, and they would give you the sleeve of CDs and you would have to change them. Right. I had gone in my career from a role where I was interacting with people continuously all day to a role where it was just me with bank statements and financial statements.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted, quite frankly, some background noise. So
Mm-hmm.
somebody said, go get a book from the library and listen to it. So I went and I got audiobooks, and I would listen to stories. So I've been listening to audiobooks for a long time, but I don't know until recently that I realized it was an option for
Mm-hmm.
me to put out an
Mm-hmm.
audiobook, right? You're like,
Mm-hmm.
you listen and you hear the very professional voices in the
Yeah.
background and all of the stuff
The
that's there
effects
in
and
the
other,
beginning. And I'm
yeah.
like, that's
Yeah.
not for me. But then in walks Miss Robin Kinney, and you're like, but
Ah.
it is all possible.
And that brings me to my next question. So, how did you even find Audio Engineers of Detroit? Like, what was that process?
So I am big on trying to find Black businesses to utilize for anything that I'm doing, and my husband will always say that I'm kind of biased toward Black women, finding Black women businesses, women-owned businesses, but I really do look for Black businesses to utilize. And I had a podcast idea that I wanted to launch, and so I started looking for studios, and I found you. And I remember doing a tour of the studio.
Mm-hmm.
But at that moment, I was running so fast that adding a podcast, it just wasn't the time. And so, but I remembered all of the services that you offered. And
Okay.
so when I got ready to write or to do an audiobook, I thought, let me just ask. I'm sure with all of the massive investment that you've made with all the studios and the equipment, I'm like, I'm sure we could she could at least point me in the right direction.
Sure.
And then found out that I could actually record with you, which was an absolutely
Yay.
amazing experience. I just have to stop for a moment and just compliment you on the professionalism and the
Oh.
ability to just make me feel comfortable. Like
Mm.
I wasn't made to feel like, oh, I know all the things and you don't, so just listen to me. It was a great experience because I felt very much in control of telling my story, but I felt like I had experts to lead me on that journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, well, first of all, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, what I love about kind of the space of recording an audiobook is that I love audiobooks.
Yeah.
So, I listen to audiobooks all the time. And so being able to sit down and be part of the process of bringing a dynamic voice like yours to the masses is just like, I consider it an honor and a privilege. And
Thank
then
you.
for the people who haven't downloaded it and you don't have a copy of Power of the Pause, you need to make sure and get it as soon as possible. Because of all the lessons, like, so just me sitting there and having the luxury of hearing firsthand of your story and how you basically turned obstacles into opportunities.
Mm,
And now you're like, okay, now I'm going to help other women who I know are going through this. It's like that's just what the whole process of creating something and just like offering it. Like, I went through this, it sucked, but oh my gosh, look at me now. And if you're in it right now, I'm going to help you to not only navigate it, because I think another part of the book that I really liked was you not only talked about navigating it, but you talked about like safeguards so that you don't go back to it.
Yes. Yes.
That's what it was. Because it's like I get tired of reading something where it's like a feel good thing where I'm like, yeah, I can do it. But how do I sustain?
Yes. Absolutely. So anything that we go through in life, I have found is a journey, right? And things are so easy to just go back to the old way of doing. So how do you sustain, right? I'm going to use probably a very common example. Right now, Robin, my legs are on fire. And my legs are on fire because yesterday was leg day in the gym. And how many times do we say, I'm going to get a hold to my health, right? January 1st, health clubs across the nation are just packed. And you go in and you feel good, right? Because I got this plan and I'm going to do it. And then leg day hits and your legs are on fire and you're like, yep, I'm not going back. I don't feel like it. I just don't feel like it. So helping to figure out how do you get kind of through that and knowing that it's different for everybody. So how do you find what works for you? Because what works for me may not work for Robin, but can you help me figure out how I can figure out what works for me? Mm-hmm. How do I push through burning leg day? Right. So like this morning I got up and I didn't feel like it, but I am headed to the gym when we get done because I got to go. Yeah. But what is sustaining me is not going to be what sustains Robin. So for instance, I was talking to my sister-in-law and kudos to her. I think she's on day 40 straight at the gym. But for her, she has to go in the evening after work. For me, that doesn't work. Ooh, I know. Right? You got to figure out what works for you. And you can't look at everybody else. Right. Say, oh, that's what they're doing. So I'm going to make it work.
Right. You have to do what works for you. That's an excellent part. And going back to the book, I think you offer so many different options on how to like stand in your truth, but also be authentic, in the workplace, showing up in the workplace as your authentic self. And, some of the stories that you shared were funny. And I was like, I think to myself, there's no way that happened.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
Everything in that book happened. And it's funny because since the book's been out, I've had a number of women reach out to me and say, I feel like you're telling my story. Yeah. Oh my goodness, Ebony, that happened to me. And I thought I was the only one. I'm like, nope, you're not the only one. Because sometimes when we experience, especially as Black women in the corporate world, when you experience things, you feel like I got to be on candid camera. This can not be happening, but it is. It is happening.
Oh my gosh. I mean, like I said, I've listened to it like 5 times just because of this in the post-production part, and then of course being there in person. But one thing I wanted to talk about was the actual recording process. So, you said that you although you listen to audiobooks all the time, you never thought like, that was available to you. So now that you're on the other side of that, like, what did you think? What did you think about the process? Was there anything that surprised you that you were like, oh, I didn't know it would be like this, or I'm glad that I did that, or?
Yeah. So 2 things. One, I never thought it was possible because I thought those were all hired actors and actresses, unless you were an actor or an actress yourself. And you did that, right? And you hear read by the author, but they're usually these huge, names. And so once I got into the process, like I said, you made it super easy for me, but I tried to prepare. Right. And so a couple of days before I came into the studio, I said, I'm going to read my book out loud. And so I did. I read through the book. I read it out loud. I sat in my office and I read the book out loud. I said, okay, I'm ready. And then I went, and I will tell you, especially with this book, 2 things. One, I thought I was going to have the emotion under control. And as you know, I did not. What shocked me about that is not so much not having the emotion under control, because there's some emotional parts of the book. But when I said to you, okay, Robin, let me get myself together, like I'm gonna cry through this, to hear you say, no, cry through it. It's fine. Your
Yeah.
readers need to hear the emotion. That was kind of shocking to me. Like, oh, wait a minute. I don't have to be this what they call the voice of God when they're doing
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
events and stuff. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be that. I can just be myself,
Yeah.
and that emotion that a lot of times when you're writing, people say, I want the emotion to come off the page. I
Mm-hmm.
want my listeners to hear the
Yeah.
emotion. I couldn't
Yeah.
be sobbing, right?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think you hear the emotion in the
For
parts
sure.
where you should hear the emotion.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that was the first surprise.
Okay.
The second surprise was what we talked about in the beginning, not knowing that I wasn't going to do this day after day, several days in a row. Like I cleared my calendar. I was like, well,
Yeah.
we're
You're
going
like,
to
no, you
record the
got me for the
audiobook.
week.
Yes. And you're like, okay, your voice,
Yeah.
you need to rest your voice. Not, I'm not a singer. I've never done voiceover work, so I've never worked with my voice before. So you hear that singers don't talk on days of
Mm-hmm.
concerts, or that
Mm-hmm.
they are drinking things with
Mm-hmm.
lemon and honey, and you hear
Mm-hmm.
those things. I didn't realize it until I got into it that my voice really was going to need to rest. So that was shocking for me too, because in my career, like we got things done. Like we said we're gonna do this. Okay, I got 4 days to get this done. But really, as a human being, my voice can't do that. So I needed
Right.
to rest. Yes.
Right.
So I think those were the two most surprising
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought up the emotion part, because there are distinct areas, especially when you talk about your father,
Mhm.
that I wanted to make sure we left in, because people are when a person chooses to listen to an audiobook, it's because they want to engage that sense. They want to hear things, because the difference between reading a book and listening to a book is when you're reading, you're hearing it in your voice.
Yes.
You're reading, you're just reading it and hearing how you would read it, versus the author, certain pauses, certain things where you may take a breath,
Mhm.
so I think that all adds to the book. And one of my favorite is, I think, the well produced audiobook was Viola Davis. And her
Yeah.
story, I didn't know anything about her background or her story. I think maybe it was that her audiobook was recommended to
Mhm.
me, and when I listened to it, I was just in awe. And I know I love an audiobook when I kind of slow down my listening of it, because I don't want it to end. And
Yes.
that was her for me. So when I compare the raw emotion of her book,
Yeah.
I think that you captured it, and it was not, I'll say, sterile. It wasn't like, buttoned up and, you're just reading a book. No, you live this.
Yes. Yes.
This was not. So that's why I wanted to make sure, like, no, 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 no. We're not reading a script here. We're
Right.
reading your story.
Yeah. And that was refreshing. It was very refreshing for me, as an author, but just as a human being, to know that the emotion was accepted, and not just accepted, the emotion was wanted. Like, give me the emotion, because so many times we try to bury that, right?
Mhm.
We, especially as Black women, right? We got to be the strong Black
Yep, you got
woman.
to show up and,
Um,
dry those tears and.
yes.
Mhm.
So to be able to be vulnerable
Yes.
in that space it was amazing, right? And it made me want to continue to push on. Whereas I think if I and first of all, the product wouldn't have been as strong as I think it is had I not shown the emotion,
Yes.
but I also wouldn't be so gung ho, if you will, about pushing others ahead to do an audiobook. Like people have reached out to me, like, what do I do? And I'm like, do the audiobook. Yes, call
Definitely.
Robin, do the audiobook. Because I think it's important. It also, another surprising thing, Robin, is that it opened my eyes to some things that I wasn't aware of. Like I know you probably remember, I had such a great time doing it. I was like, hey, if you got people that don't want to read their own, I'll
Yeah.
read it for them.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
read their audiobook for them.
Yeah.
And so I think I was surprised in that too, that
Yeah.
I actually
You would enjoy
enjoyed,
it.
right? Because you think I'm just going to sit in this booth and read this book, but it's so much more to it.
So much more because it takes you back. And then I think on those times where we had to stop, I remember you saying, reading this out loud takes me literally back to
Yep.
standing there
Yes.
and experiencing that. So it's all coming up,
Yep.
for me. And it is a different experience, I think, from writing it than, actually saying it out loud and and that those vivid images, flood back.
Yeah.
But that's
Oh,
all
they
part of
flood.
it though.
They flood. They come back.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was reading a post on LinkedIn the other day, and they were talking about advertising and how brands connect and engage with their audience. And that was one of the things they talked about was vulnerability
Yeah.
of saying, just laying bare of like, this is what happened. This is who I am. Like I walked through the fire to
Yeah.
get here because people, like you said, people have already reached out to you. People resonate with authenticity. I think that is the biggest thing right now. People want authenticity. They don't want something that's filtered and, sanitized. And they want to know that, especially when you start talking about the pandemic, it's just so much. And then your daughter at school and the scare that happened. I'm not going to give away any details of it, but what happened with that instance of like any parent can resonate
Yeah.
with that of getting text messages and you're like, what's happening? And you go from 0 to 100
Yeah. Instantly.
Yes. All these things start coming into your head. So what I love about the book and why I'm encouraging, any woman or man in the workforce to read and or listen to it, because Dr. Ebony Stone really shares, this is what I did to get out of this. This is who I had to become to get out of this. And like, so action steps, I think that was really helpful to say, okay, this is kind of like my toolkit.
Yes.
So you don't have to stumble and, around like, okay, so how do I navigate this? You're looking at all these YouTube videos, you're reading all these articles. This is like the book. And if you have anyone, let's say you have a recent college grad that's entering the workforce, especially a woman of color.
Yes.
You can put these safeguards into place. So you're starting off with, okay, these are my boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you don't have that, I want to make 2 points. One, going back to the pandemic, that is something that we did not, like, none of us could have prepared for.
Right.
None of us knew what it was going to be like. And I remember, like, when the pandemic, we were probably maybe 5 or 6 months in. And I remember saying the mental toll.
Yeah.
I remember saying that the physical toll of this pandemic is going to be awful. And you won't even be able to measure it. But the mental toll will probably far exceed that for years to come. And so many of the things that I talk about in the book that I experienced, when I was experiencing them,
Yeah.
I was in survival mode,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we all get to that point. And when I had a moment to stop and just reflect on what I was doing in those moments and how I was making myself feel or how I was making other people feel, I was blown away. But that's what happens when you go into survival mode. You literally just are trying to survive. But I think one thing that will help, and unfortunately, I let those things go during the pandemic. But your
Yeah.
point is, you've got to have guardrails before
Yes.
you got to go into survival mode. When those
Yes.
guardrails are there, when those parameters are there, when you're not borders, what's the word I'm looking for? Boundaries. When your boundaries
Boundaries.
are in
Yes.
place before the crisis hits, then you can work through that crisis a lot better
Right.
than someone that doesn't have them. In the
Right.
crisis, like you said, someone coming right out of school, I just want them to know it's gonna hit. Like
Oh yeah.
you're going to get in that meeting and things are gonna go crazy. Right? You're going to take that
And you're
position.
like, oh, they got me messed up. Because
Yes.
we've all been there. Who hasn't been there where you're sitting there and you're like, what did you
What is
just say?
happening?
I just know. What, and you try to like keep it because we're trained as Black women, keep it together.
Mhm.
You're the face in a lot of cases, I want
Yeah.
to represent, and all that. And you're like, wait a minute now. Wait a
And
minute.
I'll tell you, there's a story that's not in the book.
Okay.
It might be in the next book. I don't
Okay.
know, but I was like you said, we're often the only face,
Mm-hmm.
the only one. And so when I was working on my doctorate degree, not only was I the only Black face, I was the only woman, right, through this whole cohort. And for the most part, it was amazing. But I had a classmate that continued to refer to me as honey and baby. Oh, honey, it'll be okay. Oh, hold on, sweetie. Let me just say this. Well, hold on, sweetie. And I was so taken aback. Like, what is
Right.
happening? And so
Right.
finally, I said, okay, enough is enough. And so I pulled him to the side and I said, hey, I would prefer if you did not refer to me as honey and sweetie.
Yeah.
What I was not prepared for was his response because he said to me, oh, what did you want me to call you?
Oh,
What?
what do you call
What,
everybody
what is
else?
right? I'm sorry. You call Tom. Ebony works
Right. Right.
or Mrs. Stone,
Yeah.
whatever you want. But I say that to say that is where one of those boundaries came from, right? It was in that moment. I was like, no, I will not let words go
No.
too far. No, you need to understand how to address me, and I should have addressed him the very first time it happened.
You're
Admittedly, I did
probably
not.
so taken aback. I could imagine of like, oh, okay, it's a term of endearment. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. You're not
Right.
talking to anyone else like this.
And then the response, what do you want me to call you? I
Like
what?
what?
So I
Yeah, that's
think
odd.
we have to prepare uh, in advance for things that we never even saw coming.
Yeah. That's oh my gosh. So the entire audiobook is 4 hours long. It's about
Yep.
4 hours, 15 minutes. And I think it's an excellent way to, let's say you go on a daily walk. You have like a 30-minute walk. You can easily get through this,
Yeah.
in a week because it flows so well and it keeps you engaged. And what I liked about it is that it keeps you engaged without being preachy. I didn't feel like at the end you were like, and you need to do this. You were like, look, this is what I learned based on everything you just heard.
Yeah.
And you should do the same if you want to not completely lose it, and then live a life of joy. You know, what is
Yes.
if you're, it's like, what are we doing? I say that all the time with my girls. I'm like, okay, what are we doing? Like,
What are we doing?
what are we doing? Who
Yes.
wants to live, you know, a life of struggle, of despair, of like waking up in the morning, you're like, okay, what's going to happen today? You know, and you can make a choice. And I think that that's what you explained in the book, of that you made a conscious effort and choice to say, I'm going to make some changes and it's going to start today.
Yes. And it's okay to know that what made you happy yesterday is not making you happy today. Mm-hmm. And you need to make changes. That is okay. We're human beings. We evolve. And so the things that bring us joy evolve as well. We're learning, we're growing. And I believe, I talk about it in the book. I'm a woman of faith. I'm a Christian woman. I believe that God has plans for us, and those plans are not always our plans. And sometimes he brings you to a point where you think, okay, this is the next step. And he's like, nope, jump from this track to this track, because now I got something else for you to do, right? you finished what I needed you to do there. Now I need you to bring all of that and go here. And that's okay. It is okay. The world tells us we have to be on this track. Like, you got to get this degree, and then you got to get this next degree, and then you got to climb this ladder, and you're constantly going. But life doesn't look that way. And it's okay to say, I'm going to feed my soul, right? That's totally okay.
Yep, it sure is. And, you know, when you say that, I'm hearing not only feed my soul, but put myself first. And I know as Black women, and then put motherhood into that can sometimes feel selfish, because we're taught that you're the caretaker.
Yeah.
Take it, you know, like I think about one part of the book where when the pandemic happened and you made sure that everyone had, you know, all the things in the house, like, okay, I got to stockpile this, I got this, you know,
you remember how in the pandemic they said you can't find toilet paper because people are hoarding it?
That was you?
I was people. I had toilet paper towel for days. I don't think that we recognize, though, inadvertently, when we're not caring for self, we are teaching that to those that we are caring for, right? Yeah. So I'm going 100 miles a minute trying to care for my daughter. What am I teaching her? I am not teaching her to slow down and take care of herself. I am teaching her through example that you go until you have nothing else to give. And that, you know, what I'm trying to teach is like, hey, I'm caring for you. Your mom cares for you. Mom's going to provide, but inadvertently, or maybe in addition to, I am teaching you just go until you have nothing else to give.
Right.
So we have to be careful about those messages that we're sending and what we're teaching when we don't need to.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So this is an excellent, like if you have a book club, this is an excellent book to dissect.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Another great part is that it crosses, I believe, generations. So I think a teenager could get something out of this. Someone in college can definitely get something out of this. A recent college grad, you starting your first job, all the way up into, you know, you're retired and you're looking back on it. You know, I really think this is a good kind of cross-generational book, that if there was a multi-generational book club, this would be an excellent book to dive into, to see, you know, each chapter. Okay, what did we learn in this chapter? How does this resonate with me? You know? Yeah.
And I would love, like, hey, if anybody wants me to come to their book club, I'm more than happy to do that. The book does have some questions in the back that will help with a book club. So I think it would be great. I started out, well, you have to read the book to hear the story, but I didn't start out to write a book. But once it became a book, I
Yes.
started thinking, who is my target audience? And I zeroed in
Yeah.
on who my target audience was. And then to your point, Robin, my nephew, who's 22, he just graduated from college, said to me, Auntie, I think my friends could use this book. And I was like,
Mm,
oh, okay. And then I had a conversation with my 15-year-old
mhm.
who was talking about code switching. And he was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we could read this book. And then I
Oh,
was
yeah.
talking to my aunt who I won't, let's just say she was close to 80. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Close to 80. She read the book and she was like, man, I started realizing things about myself.
Mhm.
And so I have had people from different
Yeah.
generations say, like,
Yeah.
yeah, this would be great. And so it is written from my experience. And
Yeah.
as a 50-year-old Black woman, I thought that 50-year-old Black women it would resonate most with. But I think everybody
Hmm.
sees something in this book. Yeah.
Yes, I certainly did, and I reference it and just laugh about different parts of, the book that, like, if I'm in a situation, I'm talking to someone, and again, I don't want to give
Yeah.
stuff away, but there was one part where, yeah, there was a scene in a conference room with a colleague, and where I'm sitting there and I'm like, she does not want me to pull out my Dr. Stone on her.
Yes. Like,
Oh,
listen. Yeah.
you don't know me like that.
The, the funny thing is, it is happening right now as we speak in
Yeah,
some conference room
I'm sure.
somewhere. Somebody is being completely disrespected and trying to figure out, what do I do next? I didn't
Mhm.
handle it well, but
I-
um, you learn from those things.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think about how around the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd, all these corporations started having these, diversity, equity, and inclusion task force. They have a person dedicated to it. And now here we are 4 years later, and those people are being let go. Those task forces are being disbanded. And
Mhm.
so, it can be a little disheartening, um, for someone that works in, that corporate world of, like, okay, I thought that we were all on the same page, but if that's not a priority.
Yeah. I remember when it started, and I got a question
Mhm.
from someone, not a person of color, who said, we're doing all of these things, we're
Mhm.
trying all of these things, and it doesn't seem to be working. Why is it not working? And I said, because we don't trust you.
Mm.
And the response was, what do you mean we don't trust? And I said, we don't trust that it's genuine or that it's sincere and
Mhm.
that it will continue. And
Mhm.
then it played out just that way in many corporations. I had a conversation with someone who works in that space who said, I'm just tired. I'm just
Yeah.
tired because it is performative. And
Yeah.
so I think we have to stop waiting on a corporation to do what they should do, and make changes for ourselves, right? Corporations were built to make money. That's what they
Exactly.
were
That's
built to do.
it.
Now, the reality is that the research shows that when your organization is diverse,
Mhm.
um, that your bottom line is larger.
Mhm.
Whether or not they want to believe that, whatever, right? But we have to do what's right for us, right? And we have to start to kind of push in where we need to push in. And I think the more of us that make noise, if you will. I hate to
Mhm.
use that term, but if we make ourselves seen,
Mhm.
and we have conversations like Jasmine Crockett had, this like, so I can't be qualified and a diverse candidate. I got to be one or the other. No,
Mm.
I can be both. I am both, right?
Mhm.
To understand that diversity has more to do. It is not just about the color of my skin. but it is about my gender. It is about the way I think. It is about my upbringing, right? It just, we have to make changes and force others to do the same.
Right. That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. And so if you are someone who is not only maybe not only in this position, but maybe someone who is an outsider and see this playing out. You know, you don't necessarily have to be the person that this is happening to be an advocate. You
Correct.
know, we're not going to get any change or progress in this country if only the people who are affected by it are the ones speaking up. And
Yep.
that's where the disconnect is, unfortunately. Right, that's where we are
Yes.
right now.
Right.
Like, you can scream, we can holler, but if you're someone who's benefiting from a system and you're not like, hey, I see that this system was built for me and I'm gonna work together with you to bring some equity, then we're just spinning our wheels. But I think that this book is a great tool to have these types of conversations in the workforce, in our homes, dining room table, you know, sister circles, because I've been there where you are the only, and it
Yes.
can be very lonely, and you're not sure of how do I advocate for myself? How do I trust people? That's another thing. We didn't even talk about that. That was another element that came up in your book. Trust.
Yes. Because
Trust
you
came up a lot.
because you don't, right? At the very beginning of this session, Robin, I said that I found you because I'm looking for Black owned businesses,
Mhm.
Black women owned businesses, because there is a commonality there.
Yeah.
And I can build on that to find trust. When we live in a society that, if you watch the news at all, how in the world do you automatically trust?
Yeah.
You don't. And so finding a way to trust, I
Yeah.
was, even with everything I went through, I admit that I was blessed that I was not in the situations that I've heard about, right?
Mm.
Um, I had, now some people were awful. You'll read about those people in the book, but I had really great people
Yeah.
that I worked with as well, and people that were curious and would ask me questions.
Yeah.
But trust is not easy, really not easy for Black Americans. And just because you can't understand that doesn't mean that it's not true.
Right.
And sometimes I think that people want to, they're like, well, no, you should trust me. It's fine. It's just me. But there are systemic things at play. There are generational things at play. And maybe it is not you. Maybe it's not Ebony, but there are all the things in the Black background. And you don't have to understand them for them to be true. And I got to work through them. Right. And you
Right.
just have to, you got to understand that.
Right. Right. That's a great point. Well, thank you. I know you are a busy lady. Thank you for sharing your experience today, and for people who are considering recording an audiobook or just writing a book in general. So my final question is, so what advice do you have for someone who they have a book idea, it's all in their head? Like, what advice do you have to get out of their head and into someone's hands?
Yes. First, just sit down and start writing. I think that people believe that you have to have, like, that books are written from the first word to the
Yeah.
last word. They are not.
Yeah.
Just sit down and write. If you get halfway through a thought and another thought comes out, write that next thought, right? You can always go back and organize your thoughts, right? Just get them out, get them on paper somewhere. The second part of that is, if you truly want to write, I think it is important that you write every single day. That you
Okay.
find a space to write and that you write every single day. That advice was given to me when I was writing. I was writing out of a need that to heal, but now I write from a different place, and I think it's important that you write every single day.
Okay.
And then the last piece of advice that I will give about writing is don't put yourself in a box. Do not think that your book has to be like somebody else's book. Just write what is on your heart, because it will resonate with someone. It may not resonate with the person that you think is going to resonate with, but your story, your idea, whatever it is needed in the world. So just get it out. There are plenty of editors and
Yeah.
coaches and things that can help you once you get it on paper,
Yeah.
but just get it out.
Yeah.
So that's what I say to people that want to write a book. And then I would encourage people to truly consider audiobooks, right? And if you're going to consider doing an audiobook, of course, I am partial to Robin Kinney. Please give her a call. And I say, I say that seriously. I'm so serious. The experience that I had working with you, I am very thankful for. It was one of the most well put together professional experiences that I've had, but it didn't feel stuffy.
Yeah.
I felt like I'm getting all the service that I expect. I don't know what all of those machines you have do. And so I'm like, this is great. Like
Right.
I'm in this professional studio. I don't know what all of this does, but Robin does. But I feel like I'm just with my girlfriend who truly knows her craft. And I can trust that at the end, the product is going to be great. And that's exactly what happened. So don't eliminate possibilities. Just go for it, right? I think I'll be sending people your way. And I think if somebody is watching and they even have maybe they don't have a book written, that's okay. When you get finished, you can do an audiobook. Or if you have a book written and it's years old, it doesn't mean that you can't, right?
Right.
Because you handle everything. You had the book is available on Audible.
Yay.
I didn't do nothing. Right? I read the book and then I got an email like, hey, your book is out there, right? All of that is handled for you behind the scenes by you and your crew. So I thank you for that. It was absolutely an amazing experience. And it won't be the last. I know it won't.
Oh, great. Yep. We're looking for the follow-up.
Yes, the follow-up book, the podcast, it's all coming.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you again, Dr. Ebony Stone, for joining us this afternoon, talking about the audiobook process. Our goal is to make it as easy and as comfortable as possible. For more information, I actually put the link to your website to purchase the book. I put it in the comments here. And then from there, you can actually get your own copy. And as Dr. Ebony said, the audio version is on Amazon as well as Audible. So go ahead and give it a listen. Like I said, it's like 4 hours long. It's a very quick and easy, digestible, and I think comforting. It's like you're listening to a story that you can't believe that this is real. But then at the end, you're like, okay, these are lessons that I can incorporate into my life to have a better kind of work-life harmony. I don't say balance anymore. I say harmony, because it's like they're not going to be equal. There's a flow, there's an ebb and a flow. So yeah. So
yes, thank you so much for having me. I couldn't figure out how to go live.
That's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Later, right?
Yeah, we have this recorded, and I'll make sure you get a copy. For everyone else, enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you soon.